The crystal floors of the Zentari Palace gleamed under the 3 moons that hung in the purple sky. Lihian pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway, her soft shoes making no sound on the smooth surface. The palace was quiet at this hour. Most of the alien servants had finished their duties and gone to rest. Hyon had been working in the Crystal Palace for 2 years now. Ever since the Zentari Empire conquered Earth, humans like her had been brought to serve in their grand buildings. Across the galaxy, the work was hard, but she was grateful to be alive. Many humans had not been so lucky during the invasion. She stopped at the large window that looked out over the capital city. Thousands of lights twinkled below like fallen stars. Flying vehicles moved between the tall spires that reached toward the sky. It was beautiful in a cold way. Nothing like the warm cities of Earth she remembered from her childhood. A sound made her turn her head. It came from somewhere above her, drifting down through the crystal walls. At first she thought it might be wind, but then she heard it again. It was a cry. Low and mournful, filled with such sadness that it made her chest tight. Hyon had heard this sound before. Every night for the past 3 months, when she worked the late shift cleaning the upper floors. The other human servants talked about it in whispers during their meal breaks. They said it came from the Emperor's private chambers, from his dragon, the Zentari called the creature of Orthani. Ham had never seen one, but she had heard the alien servants describe it. They said it was as large as a house, with scales that changed color like the surface of a soap bubble. Its eyes were golden and held ancient wisdom. The Emperor loved his Vorthani more than anything else in his vast empire. But for months now, the dragon had been crying every night. The sound would start after the evening meal and continue until dawn. The Emperor's advisors had tried everything. They brought healers from across the galaxy. They used their most advanced machines to scan the creature. They offered it the finest foods and built it a new sleeping chamber filled with soft materials. Nothing worked. The dragon kept crying. Hyon pushed her cart forward again, but the sound followed her. It seemed to seep through the crystal walls, like water through cracks. She had never heard anything so sad in all her life. Even during the worst days of the war on Earth, when bombs fell like rain and cities burned, she had not heard such pure grief. She thought about her old life sometimes. Before the invasion, she had been a veterinarian in a small town. She loved working with animals, dogs, cats, horses, even the occasional wild bird that someone brought to her clinic with a broken wing. Animals could not speak, but she had learned to understand them in other ways. The way they held their bodies, the sounds they made, the look in their eyes, the crying grew louder as she reached the service elevator that would take her to the next floor. Hyon stopped and listened. There was something about the sound that bothered her, not just because it was sad, but because it reminded her of something. She had heard cries like this before in her clinic back on Earth. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Hyon pushed her cart inside and pressed the button for the 15th floor. As the elevator rose, the crying became clearer. It was definitely coming from above, from the royal quarters where only the highest-ranking servants were allowed to go. Hyon had never been to the royal floors. Human servants like her were only permitted in the lower levels of the palace. The Zentari did not trust humans with important duties. They saw them as simple creatures, good only for basic tasks like cleaning and carrying things. The elevator stopped and the doors opened. This floor looked different from the ones below. The crystal walls were smoother, almost like mirrors. The ceiling was higher and decorated with patterns that seemed to move when she looked at them. Everything here was made to show the power and wealth of the Emperor. Hyon began her work, dusting the surfaces and polishing the crystal until it sparkled. But her mind kept returning to the sound from above. In her years as a veterinarian, she had learned that animals rarely cried without reason. Pain, fear, loneliness, sickness. There was always a cause. She wondered if anyone had considered that the Emperor's dragon might not just be sad, but sick. The Zentari were very advanced. Their technology could heal injuries that would be impossible to fix on Earth, But sometimes the most advanced civilizations missed the simple things. A group of Zentari servants walked past, speaking in their musical language. They were tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like pearls. Their movements were graceful, almost like dancing. One of them noticed Hyen and made a gesture that she knew meant she should keep working and not stare. Hyen lowered her eyes and continued cleaning. But she kept listening to the crying from above. It had a rhythm to it, she realized. The dragon would cry for a few minutes, then stop, then start again. Each cry had a different tone. Some were deep and rolling like thunder. Others were higher. Almost like a whistle. It reminded her of a dog she had treated once. The poor animal had been hit by a car and suffered internal injuries. It could not tell her where it hurt, but its cries had patterns. Short, sharp barks when she touched certain places. Long howls when the pain was too much to bear. By listening carefully, she had been able to find the problem and help the dog recover. Could the Emperor's dragon be trying to communicate the same way? Could it be telling anyone who would listen exactly what was wrong if only they knew how to understand? The thought made Hyen's heart beat faster. She had no business thinking about the Emperor's private affairs. She was just a cleaning woman, barely worth noticing. But she could not shake the feeling that she might be able to help. The crying stopped suddenly. Hyen looked up at the ceiling, waiting. After a few moments, it started again. This time the sound was different, sharper, more urgent. Like the dragon was trying harder to make itself understood. Hyen finished her work on the 15th floor, and took the elevator back down to return her cart to the storage room. But as she walked through the quiet corridors toward the servants' quarters, she could not stop thinking about the sounds from above. Tomorrow night, she decided she would listen more carefully. Maybe she could learn something that the Emperor's advisors had missed. Maybe she could find a way to help the creature that cried so desperately in the crystal towers above. The next evening, Hyen arrived for her shift with a small notebook hidden in her pocket. She had found it in the storage room where old supplies were kept. The pages were yellowed and some were torn, but it would work for what she needed. As she cleaned the crystal floors, she listened carefully to the crying from above. When the dragon made a sound, she stopped what she was doing and wrote down what she heard. Low cry for 30 seconds. Silence for 2 minutes. High whistle for 10 seconds. Silence again. Park Dae-ho found her writing in the notebook during their meal break. He was a short man with kind eyes who worked in the palace gardens. They had become friends because they were both from the same city on Earth. "What are you doing, Hyen?" he asked, sitting down next to her at the small table where the human servants ate their evening meal. Hyen looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "I am keeping track of the dragon's cries," she whispered. Dae-ho's eyes went wide. "Why would you do that? It is not our business." "I think the dragon might be trying to tell us something," Hyen said. "In my old job, I learned that animals communicate when they are in pain. Maybe this dragon is doing the same thing." Dae-ho shook his head quickly. "Hyen, you need to forget about this. Humans who get involved in things that do not concern them disappear from this palace. I have seen it happen." "What do you mean disappear?" Hyen asked. "They are here one day and gone the next. No one talks about where they went." "The Zentari do?" "Not like humans who ask too many questions or try to do jobs that are not meant for them." Hyen felt a chill run down her spine, but she did not put away the notebook. "What if I could help, though? What if I could make the dragon stop crying?" "Then you would probably disappear too," Dae-ho said sadly. "The Zentari do not want to believe that humans can do things they cannot do. It would make them look weak." After the meal, Hyen went back to work. But she could not stop thinking about what Dae-ho had said. She knew he was right about the danger. She had seen other human servants get in trouble for small things like speaking too loudly or taking too long on their breaks. What she was thinking about doing was much more serious. She was cleaning near the kitchen when she heard someone call her name softly. Hyen turned to see Kim So-ra, an elderly woman who had worked in the palace longer than any other human. So-ra cooked meals for the Emperor's personal staff. Her hair was white and her hands were wrinkled, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Come here, child," So-ra said. gesturing for Hyan to follow her into a small storage room filled with cooking supplies. Hyan looked around nervously. Did I do something wrong? Sora smiled and shook her head. I heard you talking to Daeho about the dragon. He is right to be worried, but he is also wrong about some things. What do you mean? The Zentari are proud, but they are not stupid. I have been watching them for 3 years now. When they really need help, they will take it from anyone, even humans. The problem is that most humans are too scared to offer help. Sora moved closer and lowered her voice. I knew you before the war, child. My sister lived in your town. She told me about the animal doctor who could heal creatures that other doctors gave up on. She said you had a gift. Hyan felt tears start to form in her eyes. She had not talked about her old life in a long time. That feels like a different person now. It was not a different person. It was you. And you are still you even in this place. Sora put a gentle hand on Hyan's shoulder. The dragon has been crying for 3 months. The Emperor grows more worried every day. His advisors have tried everything their science can do. Maybe it's time for a different kind of knowledge. But what if Daeho is right? What if they make me disappear? Sora was quiet for a moment. That is possible. But what if you are right about the dragon? What if you could help it? Would that not be worth the risk? After Sora left, Hyan continued her work with her mind spinning. She thought about the animals she had helped back on Earth. She remembered the satisfaction of finding the right treatment, of seeing a sick creature become healthy again. She had loved that work more than anything else in her life. That night, the dragon's crying seemed louder than usual. Hyan worked her way up through the floors of the palace, getting closer to the royal quarters with each level. By the time she reached the 15th floor, the sound was so clear that she could hear every detail. She sat down in a corner, where no one would see her, and opened her notebook. For the next 2 hours, she wrote down everything she heard. The dragon would cry in bursts of 3 or 4 sounds, then rest for several minutes. The sounds had different lengths and tones. Some were deep and rumbling. Others were high and sharp. Hyan noticed that the pattern changed throughout the night. Early in the evening, the cries were shorter and came more often. Later, they became longer and more spaced out. Near dawn, they became very quiet, almost like whispers. It reminded her of the way animals behaved when they were in different kinds of pain. Sharp, quick cries usually meant sudden pain, like stepping on something sharp. Long, steady cries meant constant pain, like an old injury that never healed properly. Quiet sounds often meant the animal was getting tired from fighting the pain. By the end of her shift, Hyan had filled several pages with notes. She looked at the patterns she had written down and felt more certain than ever that the dragon was trying to communicate something specific. She thought about what Sora had said. The Emperor's advisors had used all their advanced science and technology, but the dragon was still suffering. Maybe what was needed was not more technology, but a different way of understanding. As Hyan walked back to the servants' quarters, she made a decision. Tomorrow night she would try to get closer to the royal floors. She needed to hear the dragon's cries more clearly. She needed to understand exactly what the creature was trying to say. The risk was real. She might disappear like the other humans, who had crossed lines they were not supposed to cross. The dragon's suffering was also real. And if she could help, if she could use her knowledge to ease the creature's pain, then maybe the risk would be worth it. Hyan hid her notebook under her mattress and tried to sleep. But all she could hear in her dreams were the sad cries echoing through the crystal walls above. The third night, Hyan brought more than just her notebook. She had taken a small medical kit from the storage room where old supplies were kept. It contained basic items like bandages and cleaning cloths, things that might be useful if she was right about the dragon being injured. She worked her usual route through the palace, but this time she paid careful attention to the guard rotations. The Zentari guards changed shifts every 3 hours. There was always a brief moment when the hallways were empty as one group left and another arrived. At midnight, Hyan made her move. She left her cleaning cart on the 15th floor and took the service elevator up to the royal quarters. Her heart beat so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. Every second felt like an hour. The doors opened on the 20th floor. Hen had never been this high in the palace before. The walls here were not just crystal, but seemed to be made of captured starlight. They glowed with a soft blue radiance that made everything look like it was underwater. The crying was much louder here. It came from somewhere down the long hallway that stretched ahead of her. Hein could hear the pain in every sound the dragon made. She followed the noise, moving as quietly as she could on the smooth floor. The hallway ended at a pair of enormous doors, made from what looked like solid diamond. They were slightly open, and warm air flowed out carrying a scent like flowers and rain. The dragon's cries came from beyond those doors. Hyan looked around one more time to make sure she was alone, then slipped through the gap between the doors. The room beyond was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. The ceiling was a dome of clear crystal that showed the stars and 3 moons above. Gardens grew along the walls, filled with plants that glowed in colors she had no names for. A small waterfall fell from one wall into a pool that reflected the starlight. And in the center of the room lay the dragon. Hyan had to put her hand over her mouth to keep from gasping out loud. The creature was even more magnificent than the servants had described. It was as large as the biggest building in her hometown on Earth. Its scales shifted color like oil on water, showing deep blues and purples and greens. Its wings were folded against its sides, but she could see they would span the entire room if opened. But something was wrong. Very wrong. The dragon lay on its side in an awkward position. One wing was held strangely, pressed tight against its body. Its golden eyes were half closed with exhaustion and pain. When it cried, its whole body shuddered with the effort. Hyan moved closer, her veterinarian training taking over. She could see the signs now that she was near enough. The way the dragon favored its left side, the slight swelling along its ribs, the careful way it breathed as if taking deep breaths caused pain. This was not sadness or loneliness. This was physical injury, probably an old one that had never healed properly. She was so focused on examining the dragon that she did not hear the footsteps behind her until it was too late. "What are you doing here, human?" Hyan spun around to find Emperor Vorthok standing in the doorway. He was taller than most Zentari, with skin that seemed to contain tiny stars. His eyes were the color of deep space, dark but filled with distant light. He wore simple robes, not the formal clothes she had expected. "I am sorry, Your Majesty," Hyan said, dropping to her knees. "I did not mean to intrude. I heard the crying and I thought perhaps I could help." "Help?" the Emperor's voice was cold. "You are a cleaning servant. What help could you possibly offer that my advisors and healers have not already tried?" Hyan knew this was the moment Daeho had warned her about. She could lie, make excuses, and hope the Emperor would only punish her instead of making her disappear. Or she could tell the truth and risk everything. She chose truth. "Your Majesty, before the war one was a doctor for animals on Earth. I have experience with creatures in pain. I believe your dragon is not sad, but injured." The Emperor stared at her for a long moment. "My healers have examined Kale thoroughly. They found no injuries. May I show you what I see?" Heian asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead of calling for guards, the Emperor stepped closer to his dragon. "Show me." Hyan moved carefully toward the creature. "Look at how Kale holds. His left wing, see how it is pressed against his body. And watch his breathing. He takes short, careful breaths because deep ones cause pain." As if responding to her words, the dragon made one of its crying sounds. Heian listened carefully. "That cry means sharp pain," she said. "I heard the same sound from injured animals on Earth. When Kale moves his wing, something hurts." The Emperor knelt beside his companion and gently touched the dragon's head. "Kale has been my friend for 50 years. If he was injured, I would know." "Sometimes old injuries hide themselves," Hyan explained. "They seem to heal on the outside, but inside something is still wrong. The pain builds up slowly over time until it becomes unbearable." Kale looked at Hyan with his great golden eyes. For a moment, she felt as if the dragon was trying to tell her something. Then the creature made a soft sound, different from the cries of pain. It was almost like a greeting. He has never made that sound for anyone but me, the Emperor said. Staring at Heian in surprise, Heian reached slowly toward the dragon, giving Kale time to pull away if he wanted. Instead, the great creature moved his head closer to her hand. When she touched his scales, they were warm and smoother than silk. Where does it hurt? She asked the dragon softly, as if he were one of her patients back on Earth. Kale shifted slightly and made a low rumbling sound. Then he did something that made both Heian and the Emperor gasp in amazement. The dragon carefully moved his left wing away from his body and pointed with his nose toward a spot on his ribs. He understands you, the Emperor whispered. Kale is showing you where the pain is. Heian looked at the spot the dragon had indicated. The scales there looked normal, but when she gently pressed with her fingers, she could feel something that should not be there. A hard lump beneath the skin, like a piece of metal or bone that had healed in the wrong position. I think there is something broken inside, she said. Something that pushes against nerves and causes pain when he moves or breathes deeply. The Emperor stood up slowly, his face full of wonder and confusion. How is it possible that you can see what my healers could not? Sometimes we need fresh eyes, Heian said simply. And sometimes we need to listen to what the patient is trying to tell us. As if agreeing with her words, Kale made another soft sound and closed his eyes peacefully. For the first time in months. Emperor Vorthak called for his healers immediately. Within minutes, 3 Zentari medical experts arrived carrying their advanced scanning equipment. They looked shocked to see a human in the royal chambers, but the Emperor silenced their protests. With a gesture, "Examine exactly where the human indicated," he commanded. "Look for internal damage that previous scans may have missed." The healers set up their machines around Kale. Beams of colored light passed over the dragon's body while displays showed images of bones and organs. Han watched nervously as the alien technology worked. What if she was wrong? What if the dragon's problem was something completely different? After an hour of scanning, the chief healer approached the Emperor with a troubled expression. "Your Majesty, we have found something disturbing. There appears to be a fragment of metal lodged between 2 ribs, pressing against a major nerve cluster. Our previous scans missed it because it is made of the same material as Kale's natural scale. Armor. How is that possible?" the Emperor asked. "It appears to be a piece of scale that was driven inward during some past trauma. Over time, the surrounding tissue has grown around it, but the fragment continues to cause pressure and pain." Heian felt relief wash over her. She had been right about the injury, but now came the harder question. "Can you remove it?" she asked. The healers looked at her with surprise. They were not used to humans speaking directly to them. The chief healer turned to the Emperor. "The surgery would be extremely delicate. The fragment is very close to organs that control Kale's ability to fly. One mistake could paralyze him forever. But if you do nothing, he will continue to suffer," Heian said quietly. The room fell silent except for Kale's gentle breathing. The dragon had been resting peacefully since Heian identified the source of his pain, as if simply knowing what was wrong had brought him comfort. Emperor Vorthak looked between his healers and the human woman who had accomplished what his most advanced technology had failed to do. "What would you do if this were your patient?" he asked Heian. "On Earth, we would try to manage the pain first. Make the patient as comfortable as possible while we plan the best approach to surgery. We would also try to understand exactly how the injury happened so we could avoid making it worse." "Kale was injured in a battle many years ago," the Emperor said. "Enemy ships fired weapons that could pierce dragon scales. I thought all his wounds had healed." Heian nodded. "Sometimes the worst injuries are the ones that seem to heal on the outside. The body tries to fix itself, but if something is in the wrong place, the healing actually makes the problem worse over time." She approached Kale again and spoke to him in the gentle voice she had once used with frightened animals. "Can you show us how you were hurt? Can you remember?" The great dragon opened his eyes and looked at her. Then, moving very slowly and carefully, he demonstrated how he had been flying when the weapon struck him. He showed how he had twisted his body to avoid a second shot, and how the impact had driven him into the side of a mountain. "Remarkable," whispered one of the healers. He's communicating complex information through movement and gesture. All intelligent creatures want to be understood, Hyan said. Sometimes we just need to pay attention to what they are trying to tell us. The Emperor watched this exchange with growing amazement. My people conquered dozens of worlds with our advanced technology and military might. But we never learned to truly communicate with the beings we encountered. We simply imposed our will and expected compliance. Maybe that is why your healers missed the injury, Hyan suggested carefully. They were looking for problems they understood, using tools they trusted, but they were not listening to what Kale was trying to tell them. At that moment, Choi Minho, the Emperor's chief advisor, burst into the chamber. He was a tall Zentari with silver skin and eyes like liquid mercury. When he saw Hyan kneeling beside the dragon, his face darkened with anger. Your Majesty, what is this human doing in the royal chambers? This is a serious breach of protocol. She must be removed immediately. This human has accomplished something our best healers could not, the Emperor replied calmly. She has identified the source of Kale's suffering. Minho looked skeptical. Impossible. Our medical technology is the most advanced in the galaxy. A primitive human could not know something we do not. And yet she does, the Emperor said. Perhaps our technology is not as superior as we believed. Perhaps there are different kinds of knowledge and we have been too proud to recognize them. The chief healer stepped forward with his scanning results. The human's diagnosis is correct, advisor. We found exactly what she predicted, in exactly the location she indicated. Minho stared at the medical displays in disbelief. But how could a human see what our instruments could not? She listened, the Emperor said simply. While we used our machines to look inside Kale's body, she used her mind to understand his behavior. She treated him not as a magnificent creature to be admired, but as a patient to be healed. Hyan remained silent during this exchange, but she felt a growing sense of hope. The Emperor seemed to understand that different approaches to problems could be valuable. Maybe there was a chance that her knowledge could truly help. Kale made a soft sound and nudged Hyan's hand with his great head. She scratched gently behind his ear ridge, a spot that seemed to bring him comfort. He trusts her, the Emperor observed. In all the months of his suffering, Kale has never been calm with anyone except me. Yet with this human, he is peaceful. Trust is earned through understanding, Hyan said. When someone truly listens to you and recognizes your pain, it creates a bond that goes beyond words. The Emperor nodded slowly. Then you will help us plan Kale's treatment. Your insights combined with our medical technology may be exactly what he needs. Minho looked like he wanted to protest, but one look at his Emperor's determined face told him the decision was final. I will do everything I can to help, Hyan promised. Her heart full of purpose for the first time since leaving Earth. She was no longer just a cleaning woman in an alien palace. She was a healer again, and she had work to do. Over the next 3 days, Han worked closely with the Emperor's medical team to develop a treatment plan for Kale. The alien healers were amazed by her approach to patient care. While they focused on the technical aspects of surgery, she concentrated on keeping the dragon calm and comfortable. On Earth, we learned that healing is not just about fixing what is broken, Hyan explained to the chief healer. It is also about helping the patient feel safe and understood during the process. She showed them simple techniques that she had used with animals back home. How to approach Kale slowly so he would not feel threatened. Which sounds meant he was in pain versus when he was simply communicating. How to position his body to reduce pressure on the injured area. The Emperor spent hours watching Hyan work with his companion. I have loved Kale for 50 years, he said, but I realize now that I never truly learned to understand him the way you do. Love and understanding are different things, Hyan replied gently. Love is about caring deeply for someone. Understanding is about seeing the world through their eyes. You can have one without the other, but healing requires both. On the 3rd day, Hyan made a request that surprised everyone. I would like to bring another human to help with Kale's care. Her name is Yang Sco Jin, and she worked as a physical therapist on Earth. Minho immediately objected. Absolutely not. One human in the royal chambers is already too many. We cannot allow more of them access to sensitive areas. But the emperor was curious. What could this other human contribute? After the surgery, Kale will need to rebuild his strength gradually, Hyan explained. Co Jin knows how to help injured beings regain their mobility without causing further damage. She could design exercises and treatments to help Kale recover. Fully, the emperor considered this. Over the past few days, he had seen how Hyan's knowledge complemented his healer's technology. Maybe another human perspective would be equally valuable. Bring her, he decided. Young So Jin was a quiet woman with gentle hands and sharp eyes. When she first saw Kale, she spent a long time simply observing how the dragon moved and rested. She watched him try to adjust his position to reduce pain, noted which movements were easy for him and which were difficult. His whole body has adapted to protect the injured area, she told the medical team. Look how he holds his left shoulder higher than his right. See how he turns his head to compensate for the limited wing movement. After we fix the injury, we will need to retrain his muscles to move normally again. The surgery was scheduled for the following morning. The night before, Kale seemed restless. His cries returned, not from physical pain but from anxiety about the unknown. Hyan sat with him through the night, speaking in the calm voice she had once used to comfort frightened animals. She told him stories about Earth, about the creatures she had helped, about the day when he would fly pain-free through the stars again. Surgery is scary, she admitted to the great dragon. But sometimes we have to be brave for a little while so we can feel better for a long time. Kale rested his huge head near her and made soft rumbling sounds, as if he was trying to tell her his own stories in return. The morning of the surgery, the royal chambers were filled with the most advanced medical equipment in the Zentari Empire. But it was Hin who helped Kale remain calm as the healers prepared their instruments. I will be here the whole time, she promised him. When you wake up, the pain will be gone. The surgery took 6 hours. The fragment of scale armor had indeed grown into the surrounding tissue, making removal extremely delicate. But the healers worked with new confidence, guided by Hyan's insights about how Kale's body had adapted to the injury. When the dragon woke up, the first thing he saw was Hyan's face. The first sound he made was not a cry of pain, but a soft trill of relief. How do you feel? She asked him. Kale carefully moved his left wing. For the first time in years, he was able to extend it fully without pain. His golden eyes grew bright with wonder and joy. Over the following weeks, Seo Jin worked with Kale to rebuild his strength. She created exercises that gradually restored his full range of motion. She taught him how to stretch muscles that had been tight for too long, how to balance his body properly again. The emperor watched his companion's recovery with amazement. Not only was Kale free from pain, but he was becoming stronger and more graceful than he had been in decades. Your people possess knowledge that we had dismissed as primitive, the emperor told Hyan. We focus so much on our technological superiority that we forgot the value of wisdom that comes from experience and compassion. Every species has something valuable to contribute, Hyan replied. We just need to be willing to listen and learn from each other. One evening, as Kale practiced flying around his chamber for the first time since his injury, the emperor made an announcement that would change everything. I am creating a new position in the palace, he declared. Hyan will become my chief companion specialist, responsible for the care and well-being of all creatures in the royal household. Seo Jin will serve as her assistant and oversee physical rehabilitation programs. Minho looked stunned. Your Majesty, surely you cannot mean to elevate humans to such important positions. I mean exactly that, the emperor replied firmly. These humans have accomplished what our most advanced science could not. They deserve recognition and respect for their unique contributions. That night, for the first time in months, the crystal palace was filled not with cries of pain, but with songs of joy as Kale celebrated his freedom from suffering. The sound echoed through the corridors, carrying a message of hope to every human servant who heard it. Change was coming to the Zentari Empire, and it had started with one woman who refused to ignore the cries of a suffering creature. 6 months later, the Crystal Palace had changed in ways that no one could have imagined. What started with one human woman helping a suffering dragon had grown into something much larger. Hyan now wore robes of deep blue instead of the simple gray clothes of a servant. Her new quarters were in the same section as the Emperor's other advisors, with a view of the gardens where Kale loved to rest in the afternoon sun. But the greatest change was not in her clothing or living space. It was in how the other inhabitants of the palace looked at her. The Zentari servants no longer dismissed her as just another human. They came to her for advice when their own companion animals showed signs of distress. The palace guards nodded respectfully when she passed. Even Minho, who had once wanted her removed from the royal chambers, now consulted her about matters involving interspecies communication. "I was wrong about your people," he admitted to her one day. "I thought intelligence could only be measured by technological advancement. I did not understand that wisdom comes in many forms." The changes extended beyond the palace walls. Emperor Vorthak had issued a decree throughout the empire, establishing new programs to study and preserve the knowledge of conquered species. Humans were no longer restricted to menial labor. Those with skills in medicine, engineering, arts, and other fields were given opportunities to contribute their expertise. Li Jinwu, Hyan's younger brother who had been working as a maintenance worker, was chosen to head a new program called the Interspecies Communication Initiative. His job was to identify humans with special knowledge and help them share it with the Zentari scientific community. "I never imagined when we came to this place that we would be able to help instead of just serve," Jinwu told his sister during one of their weekly dinners. "Neither did I," Hyan replied. "But I think the universe has a way of putting us where we are needed most, even when we cannot see the purpose at first." The most dramatic change was in Kale himself. The great dragon had not only recovered from his injury, but had become a symbol of the new cooperation between species. He spent his days flying freely around the capital city, no longer confined to the palace. Children of all species would stop and point when they saw him soaring overhead, his scales catching the light of the 3 moons. In the evenings, Kale would return to his chamber where Hyan would check on his health and simply spend time with him. Their friendship had grown into something neither had expected. The dragon would tell her about his flights through stories expressed in movement and sound. She would share news from around the palace and updates on the humans who were finding new roles in the empire. One particular evening, as they sat together watching the stars through the crystal dome, Kale made a series of complex sounds that Hyan had never heard before. "What are you trying to tell me?" she asked. The dragon moved to the center of the room and began what could only be described as a dance. He spread his wings wide, showing their full magnificent span. He moved in slow, graceful circles, his scales shifting through every color of the rainbow. The sounds he made were no longer cries or simple communications, but something like music. Emperor Vorthak entered the chamber just as Kale finished his performance. "I have never seen him dance like that," the emperor said in wonder. "I think, he is celebrating," Hyan replied. "Not just his recovery, but everything that has changed because of it," the emperor nodded. "He has reason to celebrate. Reports are coming in from across the empire about new discoveries, made through cooperation between our people and the species we once subjugated. A human engineer on the mining world of Kepler 442 has designed a new extraction method that is both more efficient and less harmful to the environment. A team of aquatic beings from Oceanus has taught our scientists new techniques for underwater construction that will revolutionize our shipbuilding." "What started here with Kale is spreading throughout the galaxy," Hyan observed. "Yes, and it is only the beginning," the emperor said. "I have been thinking about establishing an academy of interspecies studies, where beings from all our worlds can come to learn from each other. Would you be interested in serving as its first director?" Hyan felt her heart skip a beat. "Your Majesty, I am honored by the offer, but I am just one person. Such a responsibility would require someone with much more experience." "You are exactly The right person? The emperor insisted. You have already proven that the most important qualification is not advanced degrees or technical expertise. It is the ability to listen, to understand, and to see solutions that others miss. That night after the emperor left, Hyan sat with Kale and thought about how much had changed since that first night when she heard him crying. She had been just a cleaning woman then, invisible and ignored. Now she was being offered the chance to help shape the future of an entire galactic empire. "What do you think?" she asked the great dragon. "Should I accept?" Kale moved close to her and rested his head gently against her side. The rumble he made was deep and warm, full of encouragement and affection. "You think I should do it, do not." "You?" she said, scratching behind his ear ridge in the spot that always made him happy. The dragon lifted his head and looked directly into her eyes. Then he made a sound she had heard only once before, on that first night when she had identified the source of his pain. It was a sound of recognition, of understanding, of trust. "All right," Hyan said with a smile. "If you believe in me, then I believe in myself." 3 months later, the Academy of Interspecies Studies opened its doors on a beautiful world called Harmony, chosen specifically because it had never been conquered by anyone. Representatives from hundreds of species came to learn from each other and share their unique knowledge. The opening ceremony was held in a vast amphitheater under an open sky. Emperor Vorthak gave a speech about the importance of cooperation and mutual respect. Then he introduced Director Li Hyan, who would lead this new institution. As Hyan stepped up to speak, she looked out at the diverse crowd of beings who had come to participate in this grand experiment. She thought about Park Daeho, who was now training other humans to serve as cultural ambassadors. She thought about Kim So-ra, who had been invited to teach courses on traditional Earth cuisine. She thought about Yang Seo-jin, who was developing new rehabilitation techniques that worked for multiple species. But mostly she thought about Kale, who circled overhead as she spoke, his joyful songs carrying across the amphitheater and out to the stars beyond. "We are here today because we have learned that knowledge belongs to no single species," Hyan began. "Each of us sees the universe from a different perspective, and each perspective has value. When we combine our different ways of understanding, we can solve problems that seemed impossible and create wonders we never imagined." She paused and looked up at Kale, who responded with a triumphant cry that seemed to express the hopes and dreams of every being present. "Today we begin a new chapter in galactic history, not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners in the greatest adventure of all, learning from each other." The applause that followed was unlike anything ever heard in the galaxy before. It came from voices and sounds and communication methods from hundreds of different worlds, all united in celebration of a simple truth that had been discovered in the crying of a dragon and the compassion of a human maid. In the Crystal Palace back on the Zentari capital world. The corridors that had once echoed with cries of pain now rang with sounds of joy, hope, and the promise of a brighter future for all. The revolution had begun with understanding, and it would transform the galaxy with love.